All right, we'll call the May 2nd, 2023 Site Plan Review Technical Advisory Committee meeting to order. I'll note that we have a quorum. First item of business is approval of the minutes from April 4th, 2023. Are there any changes or motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to new business. Item A, the request of 238 Deer Street LLC owner for property located at 238 Deer Street, requesting a conditional use permit in accordance with section 10.1112.14 of the zoning ordinance for provision of no on-site parking spaces where 11 spaces are required. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 125, Lot 3, and lies within the Character District 4, CD4 district.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Technical Advisory Committee, John Chagnon from Ambit Engineering, Haley Ward. Also here today is Mark and Richard Desjardins from McHenry Architects, and Stuart Mitchell, who is going to be the construction manager for the project. The project came through before, and we're asking to reapprove a CUP parking, conditional use permit parking at the site for 0 spaces provided where 7 are required. The project is sort of a small lot that does not have enough room to put in basement parking, and existing building coverage is quite large, so the proposal is to sort of match the building but put in micro units. 20 to 21 micro units. The application has 21 for the parking calcs. So the Technical Advisory Committee is charged with a certain part of the application process will be going to the Planning Board, but your role here is to review prior to the Planning Board the proposed number of off-street parking spaces and actually demonstrate that the proposed number is sufficient for the proposed use. So we're not planning to provide any parking, but we have, the application has gone in with 7 required where 0 are provided. So I did hand out, we received one comment before the meeting from staff, and that was the land use code we used in the alternative analysis. So you have the City of Portsmouth parking requirements, which are half a space per unit, which yield 10.5 spaces, and then 1 space per 5 visitor unit, which is 4.2. So the total required is 15. That's reduced by 4. So there's 11 required under the ordinance. And I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. That's 11 are required, and we're proposing 0 on site. When you do a parking demand summary based on other sources, the parking requirement is between 7 and 8 vehicles. So we use the ITE Land Use Code 223 for the parking demand. It's one of a few codes that are in that ballpark. I just printed them all out. 220 is multifamily housing, low rise, and that one I highlighted does have in the study group, there was an average of 2.72 residents per occupied dwelling unit. These units are less than 500 square feet, so 2.7 is pretty much the census data average for the entire city when you take the total population and divide it by the number of dwelling units. So there's plenty of units that have more than 3 people in them that skew that average. Then there's code 221, which is multifamily housing mid-rise. That might be more appropriate. Again, though, that does say buildings that are between 4 and 10 floors of living space and an average of 2.5 residents per dwelling unit. 222 is more than 10 floors of living space, so that probably doesn't apply. And then I landed on the 223 affordable housing. And in the ITE definition, it talks about affordable housing rented at below market rate to households that include at least one employed member. So affordable gets kicked around a lot in a number of ways and definitions, and this is going to be market rate housing. It's not subsidized housing, but it is going to be a function of its size. So at the market, because of the size of the unit, it is going to be more affordable, probably affordable to the 100% median income earner in the city of Portsmouth, which in your ordinance allows for quote-unquote affordable housing projects to be developed. So that's my take on why I use that. I'm open to suggestion, either go with the one that was suggested or a blending to a different number. I'll answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, John. Any comments from TAC? Questions?
So you're using 223 here?
Correct.
So under land use subcategory, both 1 and 2 do state income limitations. Are there income limitations to make this affordable housing?
So that is going to not hit the button when you use that definition, correct? It is not going to be restricted to people with certain income limitations, but by the nature of the size of it, people with higher incomes probably would not want to be there, be in a 500 square foot apartment without a parking space, but
Yeah.
I get your point, so. Yeah, these are sort of, they all have kind of issues about certain parts of the definition, I think.
Is there any limit to the number of people per unit that they'll have here? 500 square feet is pretty small, but there's no lease limit, right?
I don't think there would be, but there's only going to be one bed.
Yeah,
Yeah, like a one-bedroom or a studio.
it's usually 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah,
I
imagine more
think
than-
in this particular design, it's a Murphy bed.
Some are, yeah. 1 or 2 people would be a reasonable. Well, given we've seen this before, it's the same project, correct, as?
Yes.
I have
Site plan approvals have been extended.
I have a motion to make for at least discussion, because I think, again, almost everybody here has seen this before. Does somebody want to speak from the
No,
public?
I do.
All right, I'll wait till then.
If there aren't any other comments at this moment, we'll open it for any public comment.
Right.
Go ahead, Liz. Warner.
Good afternoon. Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. Before you is a 0.14 acre lot. The footprint is going to be increased by 1,000 square feet. This is the average size lot for the single-family homes on Miller Ave. Complete parking relief is being asked for. If the 7 to 8 parking spaces recommended to the planning board, minimally, they should be on the plans prior to moving forward. It is my understanding that is TAC, which recommends adjustments to actual plans. And in this case, the first floor could be recommended to include the minimum of 7 to 8 parking spaces. Because TAC deals with the design plans. Once it goes to planning board, with TAC's approval, design plans will no longer be discussed. The first floor shows 2,917 square feet of retail space. The ITE parking demand shows there is a direct need of 7 to 8 parking spaces, no matter how you slice it. Due to the downtown overlay district, the project is required by Portsmouth to have a minimum of 11 spaces. Normally, they would need 15. How can 7 or 8 spaces be recommended when there are none included on the plan? Perhaps the recommendation to the planning board should be this project will be reassessed to have a minimum of 7 to 8 spaces on site prior to proceeding to the planning board. Just last year, a 0.06 acre lot on McDonough Street was designed with a total of 3 parking spaces, a 3-story building, and a yard. It is unbelievable that this structure has been submitted without even providing 7 spaces on site. In this last year, while this project has not been moving forward, West End Yards ended up asking for more spaces because micro units do come with people who own cars. All the other North End developments before this and other boards have provided at least the bare minimum of parking. Rains Ave project recently looked all over for more available off-site parking and came back and declared there is none. They would have to make their parking work on-site. People who go to work during the day still need to park a car for 12 to 16 hours, and on weekends they need a place to put it. Those who work from home will need 24 hours. Neither Bridge Street nor Deer Street will be able to provide parking for that length of time. Hanover Street is full. The Foundry Garage is already close to capacity, and when Lot 3 gets built on Hill Street, it will be at capacity. This is an unrealistic design plan and could be adjusted to include the absolute bare minimum which ITE is recommending. If cost is a factor, spaces could be rented to tenants and condo people could buy their spaces. Please ask this development team to go back to the drawing board and include 7 to 8 spaces of the 15 that are actually needed. If you decide not to do this, recommend to the planning board that they need a total of 11 required spaces. They are already getting a 4-space reduction because they're in the downtown overlay district. Please don't provide a bonus on a bonus by reducing it by 7 spaces. Thank you. And please keep in mind, a lot has changed in Portsmouth in a year.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public or anyone on Zoom? It's just been. All right, we'll close the public comment portion and open it back up for discussion. Eric?
Yeah, I think it's important to distinguish between parking requirements and parking demand analysis. The requirements are just based on what the city's codes are, whereas the demand analysis is based on what the actual demand will be for parking. And Liz brought up a point that I had overlooked actually in my review, is that the first floor will have some space in it, some use in there that's going to have a demand for parking. So that's not included in the analysis. But I believe that the 221 is probably the most applicable land use code because it's, between 4 and 10 floors of living space. Whether or not there's a living space on the first floor, you still have 4 floors in this building. And it's not income restricted. There's no eligibility requirements here. Yes, it'll be a lower price, but it's just because it's smaller. On a per square foot basis, these are assumed to be market rate, just a smaller size. So I think that Land Use Code 221 would apply, which would be 1 space per unit, and some more additional spaces would be demanded by the first floor as well. So I see it as a demand as actually more than 21 spaces. But the requirements are another matter. I mean, I'm talking just about demand.
Right.
Is it not possible to respond at this point? Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
The downtown Portsmouth has been through a number of parking assignments, criteria. It's an urban area where the city is providing parking, in a sense, to a lot of the downtown businesses. You can park on the street, go to the business. In fact, we're not required to provide any parking for the first floor use. So I understand the demand analysis, but that demand would be served by the on-street parking and the parking garage. So I think you're inferring that we should put that in the thing we send to the planning board, and I would resist that because it's going to take and make the case inflated and make it look like we're asking for more relief than we are.
Well, I think that's a good point to make, but I'm saying that the demand is the demand, whatever it is. Wherever that supply is met is another matter, but the actual demand of this project would be 21-plus spaces. Granted, yes, it could be met in a garage or on street or somehow, but that demand has to be met somewhere, somehow. I'm not saying it has to be met on site. But, you know, it would need
Well,
at least 21 spaces.
You do realize that the previous approval, where the planning board decided that 7 spaces was the appropriate number of spaces to provide off-site parking in a lease or other type of arrangement, was the appropriate number. So the planning board has already focused in on, okay, you got to provide that parking. So I just don't want to get into a discussion about how do you account for the retail spaces as a business owner, having to provide that. It's a part of the supply that all the businesses access.
I'm just looking at the wording of the ordinance. It says provide demand analysis, and so, yeah, to determine how much there is demand. Getting into requirements and how it's met is another matter, but the actual demand is pretty straightforward, and you use industry standards and apply it.
Well, I'm going to take a contrary position to the previous 2 speakers and make a motion and see where it lands. I'd make a motion that TAC approve this application as presented. If I've got a second, I'll
second.
justify why, in my mind, we need to proceed with this project as originally approved and presented, albeit modified for the 7 spaces that you were originally trying to find within the surrounding context. So I don't normally write this stuff down, but I just did it before the meeting because I understand this is a unique circumstance to be back here with a very unique property and a very unique parking situation and housing type. So number one, unlike all other properties in the North End, this property is extremely small compared to the urban renewal properties that were left behind. It's 6,000 square feet. It's about 55 feet wide, which is insufficient to provide parking within the building and meet any type of turning radius. You couldn't put 6 or 7 or 8 spaces in the ground floor of this building, nor would we want it on the ground floor in downtown Portsmouth. This is what we've been trying to get away from. This is a property that is not well suited for on-site parking. We've had conversations here at TAC about the perils of backing into the street with the 1 space they were suggesting at the beginning of the process 2 or 3 years ago, and not wanting another curb cut next to the garage at 46 Maplewood. So I think recognizing it's too narrow, it's too small, it's got an odd shape that limits its width, and the curb cut would make up half the width of the frontage, be right next to the abutting curb cut. There's a million reasons why on-site parking for this site makes 0 sense. And you guys spent a lot of time, at our suggestion, working with 30 Maplewood to try and widen that site, turn that building. I participated in those conversations, and they fell apart largely because 30 Maplewood backed away from wanting to come up with a better and more efficient parking plan for their property next door. We were trying to put that building on the corner of Bridge and Deer Street, but we failed in that endeavor because 30 Maplewood pulled out of the redesign. That's not unimportant in terms of level of effort. Number 2, the planning board already approved this same project in 2019 or 2020. I don't remember when it was. A conditional use permit was approved. These guys made a substantial investment in time, money, and effort to get that approval before they went to the HDC, before they went through the full permitting process. They've spent an inordinate amount of money to design and permit this building, to find out now that it no longer suits our needs to have that project proceed. Number three, the HDC fully supports this design. They spent 7 or 8 months at the HDC getting that new building redesigned to fit within its context, albeit with the micro units above the ground floor, commercial use on the ground floor, and one that's not in the basement, which it would be today if they were to reuse this building. That basement is actually a first floor that would have to be converted to commercial space, and the bar would be a residential unit. It's above 6 feet above grade. It doesn't constitute a ground floor, and they would have to reduce if this all fell apart. I've been presented with plans from the applicant should this fall apart, and not last week, many months ago, as their permits were expiring, where they would potentially reuse this garbage building that sits on that site since 1960 and put fewer units in it, use the exemption of the downtown overlay district and the credit of the 4 spaces in order to put 3 units in the building and put the commercial use that's required in the basement. That's not an outcome that I think anybody wants to see, is that VFW building stay on the landscape for the next 50 years. Number 4, I think this project represents, for the first time, a critically absent housing type that we don't have really in downtown Portsmouth. We don't have micro apartments. Mark McNabb tried it at 93 Pleasant Street. It didn't work out. He's doing an office building. These are going to be far more affordable than anything that's downtown in Portsmouth now or in the future. This is Millionaire's Row if you look at the price of the condominiums that are being built and marketed in the North End. These are under 500 square feet. The fact that they don't have parking is going to make them even more affordable. So I think we need to recognize that the downtown business district needs this type of housing, even if it doesn't have the deed restriction that it is below market in perpetuity. It will be significantly less, maybe not on a square foot basis, but that's just scratching the surface. It's going to be a dwelling unit with utilities and the ability to cook food at a kitchen and sleep there. It's a unit. And I think if we look at the future development potential in the North End, there's nothing left in the North End except Lot 4, and the hotel's under construction that's next to the parking garage. They've got their residential, they've got the lion's share of their parking inside that building. They're using some of the credit of the parking structure that came with DSA for that lot. 161 or 89 Foundry Place, which was on Hill Street, which is under construction, is a mixed-use building that's also drawing on a portion of their credit in the garage. The rest of that parking is on-site. The new building at the corner where Wells Fargo is on Lot 5 has its own on-site parking for residential units. The 145 Maplewood, which needed no on-site parking for any of its use because it's an office building, has on-site parking when they didn't need to provide it. Rains Ave, the AC Hotel, 53 Green, 2 Russell, the 3 buildings, Port Walk, all of those structures have on-site parking for their residential units, and many of them have parking for some of the commercial parking demand that they didn't even have to provide under the city's ordinance. The only thing that's left in the North End for the next 5 to 10 years is dealing with the Ferguson building, Redland Johnson, whatever you call it, which is a 30,000 square foot parcel that would adequately support on-site parking because of its size and its shape. So should they redevelop that site at the head of Foundry Place, there's ample opportunity, given the size and shape of that parcel, to provide on-site parking for any residential use. Lot 4, same thing. Lot 4 is a 20,000 square foot parcel. This is only 6. It's 3.5 times bigger. It meets the dimensional requirements to lay out on-site parking on the ground without it being on the street side. And if Lot 4 ends up having residential units on the upper floors, they're going to be able to provide it. This is the one lot in the North End that does not meet the dimensional requirements to provide on-site parking. So we're stuck with it. They're stuck with it. We're stuck with it. We've already done this. I think we've got to let this project go forward and not change the deck up 2 years later because they weren't able to find the 7 spaces within a reasonable distance, just like Rains Ave couldn't find it a half a block away. This is our micro apartment experiment in downtown Portsmouth, and I think it's worth taking the risk. And I think we shouldn't assume, just because a demand analysis might say, hey, you got to have one or two people, assume they're going to live in there, and they're all going to bring a car with them. There's a high likelihood there's demand, given the shape, size, and affordability of these units based on the shape and size and the lack of parking, that not everybody that's going to live there is going to have a car. And if they do, they've got to go find, like anyone else downtown, they've got to find a parking space that they can use and pay for. And I think for all those reasons, we should stay the course, support this, for all those reasons. I think we've collectively made a substantial investment in seeing this project go forward. They just couldn't happen to find the 7 spaces, so here they are again. And the planning board, at least 2 members suggested, they found out when they went to the planning board for the extension that the planning board didn't actually have jurisdiction or the authority to extend the conditional use permit. They extended the site plan approval for this project. They were requested to extend the conditional use. The ordinance didn't allow it, so they were sent back here to redo that. And some of the members actually begged them to come back here to redo it and consider even dropping the requirement that was in the previous approval for the 7 off-street spaces, because they too want to see this project move forward, knowing we are not opening the floodgates for another 50, 100, 400 micro apartments within the reasonable proximity of Foundry Place. There's no real estate left to do that. We're kind of at the end of the north end here, and I think we owe it to these guys to see this move forward.
I'll speak to my second. I agree with most of what Nick said, and the fact that there's retail in the downstairs and these are micro units means that maybe someone who lives in the building could actually work in the building and not need a car. But we don't have any micro units in the downtown. We're trying to get housing in the city. This is not affordable. We can't seem to get that built in terms of affordable stipulations in many places. So this is a good opportunity for us to do that, and I agree that since the planning board approved it once already, there's no reason not to bring it back and approve it. I'd like to see these kind of units built. There's a parking garage right across the street, so if they want to have parking, they can sign up to have a space in the lot if there's room available, or they can have on-street parking. I don't think it's a deal breaker that they don't have parking for this building. Given the size of it, I support the application getting renewed, essentially, with the planning board's prior support and tax prior support. So that's why I voted for the second.
Is there any additional discussion?
I'd like to make some points about the previous approval. Looking back through the file, it doesn't appear that an ITE demand analysis was provided last time, only a requirements analysis based on the city ordinances. And if that's what we reviewed, I agreed with their requirement analysis, but I never had a demand analysis presented to me to review. Now I do, and I'm saying this is the way that demand analysis should be configured. And I think it's important that the planning board has this correct information in front of them when they make their decision as to how much parking they will require. So,
Pass this to Eric. This is the Goral Palmer report that had a
yes, but I
demand
don't think that
analysis.
went to TAC. I think that only went to the planning board. I don't think I ever saw that. Looking at the dates of the meetings and submittals, I don't recall.
This was, I can't speak to that. I know that this was a part of the previous
Yeah,
approval.
and I did see that looking through the file as a planning board submittal, but I don't recall seeing it as part of the tax submission. So I remember looking at the parking demand, the requirement analysis, and I was okay with that. You know, the way you get to the 7, whatever the 11 spaces were. But-
So-
and I agree with a lot that Nick and Peter say that, you know, this kind of housing is needed. It makes sense, but I just want the analysis to be done correctly and presented to the planning board correctly.
And I support that, Eric, and I support your position. I do want to clarify that particular statement in my 5 or 6 point justification for moving this forward was by far the least important justification for moving it forward, was what the numbers say and what they mean. I stand behind all the other evidence that suggests, regardless of what was done last time and how it was done, that this project makes sense to proceed based on the unique features of the property within the north end, what's been done and what's coming and likely to happen. So,
Yeah, and I would just add, it's unique. We don't have a micro unit, and it's not going to be 2.7 people. It's going to be 2 or less.
this
So
site does not
absolutely-
support on-site parking. It's just that simple.
Absolutely. We'll put all the numbers in there because it's the planning board's choice, like you say. You just want it to reflect what you think the number should say,
No.
but it's ultimately the planning board's decision.
Yes.
Yep.
Is that a stipulation?
What?
That
Just to update the
to
parking.
update the analysis?
That's what Eric was recommending, right?
Yeah, that's my recommendation, is to update the analysis using the land use code 221.
One. Does the motion maker support that?
As long as it's 6-point font, I'm good with that.
How about the second?
Well, I guess I'm just stuck on the 2.5 residents per occupied dwelling unit. In the 221. Doesn't meet that. Well, I don't think anybody could live 2.5
Yeah.
people in it.
I,
500 square foot.
yeah, I didn't see that.
It seems obscene. So this has to be framed properly. That's an excellent point. These are under 500 square
I
feet.
understand, it fits better in the title and the restriction on the heating affordable component.
Yep. I don't-
But again, I kind of agree with Nick, I agree it should be correct, totally. But
I'd also-
whether it's 7 or 11 or whatever we come up with.
that was handed out at the meeting today is not from the current manual.
Okay.
This is from volume 3. I didn't see that wording in the current manual for volume 5.
I'm sorry. We subscribe to ITE. We paid we pay for subscription. That was right off today off their website. So I'm sorry if it's not right, but it's not my fault.
Yeah.
I paid the money to get the ITE stuff, and it's not cheap.
I know.
So if they on their website has something from 3 versions ago, I'm pissed.
Yeah,
I'll be talking to them.
because I've got it right here from the page. My page number is 89, and this is page 252. I'm in volume 5, and this is volume 3. So,
Well, that's right off the website.
yeah.
I can't, in my own
It'd be helpful to
mind.
resolve that for the planning board.
Well, how about something to the effect that gets inserted here? Although a parking demand analysis, and I probably got it all wrong because it's so unimportant to me right now, but although the parking demand analysis requires 11 spaces for the project, blah, 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 we just leave it at that and not get into this crazy conversation about what's the best fit and get caught on numbers that may or may not be applicable in certain segments to the project. And that way, at least it's acknowledged it should be 11 instead of 7, if that's in fact where we landed, but I don't even know anymore where we landed for that number.
I take exception with one word, and that's
Yeah.
requirement versus demand.
Okay, so what do you want it to say? Parking requirement analysis?
No, the demand analysis.
I said parking demand analysis, didn't I?
Well, you said that the demand analysis shows 11 spaces.
Yes.
No, it's the requirement analysis shows 11.
Okay.
The demand analysis shows 21 plus.
At the general urban suburban, 0.99 per unit?
It was 1 per unit in the 221 multifamily housing mid-rise in the,
Volume 5.
And was that 10 PM to 5 AM?
I'm looking at the average rate and during the peak period on this, which is a Sunday.
Because you did say you saw the Goral Palmer this time, the report from the previous submission.
I saw it, yes,
Yeah.
but I didn't read it carefully because it's not part of this submission.
Okay, so they did a lot of work to identify different ITE rates, and it's from the 5th version, and general urban suburban 0.99, dense multi-use urban 0.53, city center core 0.16, and dense multi-use urban single room only 0.26. And they blended that together, and they came out with 0.49, which coincidentally is the 0.5 that the city established, which is
Yeah,
interesting. I mean, I don't know where you got the 0.5 to create your ordinance, but that kind of matched into that.
And I haven't looked at that, so I really can't comment. I mean, it wasn't part of this submittal. So. But yeah, it was, I looked at the current IT manual where it said 1 per unit on a weekday, on Sunday was the peak period. You know, the average peak occupancy was one per unit.
So, yeah,
And then you have the
we're
additional
not
space on the
going to
floor.
get into, we did some additional work at looking at available parking in the neighborhood when we submitted to the planning board. I don't know if you saw the planning board submission.
Yeah, the different lots in the area.
Yeah, the different lots in the area, and we did some parking counts that showed the amount of available spaces in the parking garage. And we're not saying that those will be available when this gets built in a year and a half, but it's pretty available as far as the number of cars that are parked there on a Monday morning at 7 o'clock, which would be indicative of the people that actually live in the downtown. There's 113 cars in that garage.
Yeah, that's the conditions now, but, we don't know what the conditions will be in a few years, and that's a decision for the planning board to make. I'm focused, what TAC is charged with here is analyzing the parking demand analysis, and I'm pointing out what I see needs some adjustments in the analysis. And what the planning board does with the results of that analysis is up to them, but
All right, so we have a motion and a second. We have a recommended stipulation that the parking demand analysis be updated to reflect the current ITE for 1 space per unit. Do you agree to that, or?
I don't know.
and it should also account for the space on the first floor.
So even though the first floor commercial, because we're talking about the demand analysis.
It's demand, not requirements, but demand.
Update to Land Use Code 221.
Yeah, for the residential portion. All the arguments about parking and the actual need for it is another matter, but in how it's going to be supplied, but
Yeah.
to do a demand analysis,
I
that's,
think it's a unique situation that we're not going to see more of. And those are people that are, if they do have a car, they're going to be leaving probably in the morning to go somewhere, or maybe they're going to work in the building below and not need a car, hopefully. But I'd like to see more of that. And the fact that they already have a site review approval and could get this project built is a big reason why I support it. The planning board supported it previously. I'd like to see it go forward and not have them start over. Or do the alternative of some big luxury units that end up with more than 11, or, well, I don't know how many they get in there, 3 or 4 units probably, but they're going to end up with a lot of cars too. So, the alternative isn't great, in my opinion.
but, we're charged with reviewing
Yeah.
the demand analysis, and that's what I've done.
Yeah,
That's-
no, I understand.
So because of that, I'll reluctantly agree
Okay.
to insert something to that effect.
Well, I think it would be better because I think I could see the planning board also getting held up on this affordable housing
Yep.
category in the demand analysis, and if it's just.
And the applicant can
it's-
address it. The applicant can
Yeah.
address it if they find a different interpretation they
Right.
want to put forward. They can do it at the
So
planning
if
board
we can
meeting.
avoid that, yeah. Okay.
But I think Eric's right. It is our charge to look at it, so we know.
Okay, is everyone clear on the motion?
No.
No? The motion is to recommend approval to the planning board and with the condition that the applicant update the parking demand analysis to reflect the land use code 221 in the ITE.
So it's approved as presented, and I'd like my findings included in the letter of decision that I read into the record.
Is that a yes or no? Are you all right? Okay.
Do I have to second that?
No, well, Peter seconded it.
Yeah.
We're just clarifying the motion, what's on the
You
table.
understood it.
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
That's all we have, so. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second? We're adjourned.